Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. Well, good evening and namaste, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday evening in reading and discussion of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Our beloved reader is Haima Naidu, and we are well along in the introduction to the Gospel, which was written by Swami Nikhilananda. It's really quite comprehensive and is a very good short biography of Sri Ramakrishna. So, as I said, we're well along. Haima will tell us where we are, and then someone who has a hard copy of the book can tell us where we are in the hard copy of the book, because Haima's reading from a PDF. But before we begin, is there anything left over from any of our previous discussions, any of our previous readings or discussions that you'd like to comment on, or that remains a concern or question that you would like clarified before we move on? Anything at all from anyone? All right, dears. Well, Haima, thanks again, as always, for your wonderful service as our reader. Please tell us where we are in the PDF, and perhaps someone who knows can tell us where we are in the hard copy of the book.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. I'm honored to do this. Good evening and namaste, everyone. We are on page 41 on PDF, and I believe you have to subtract 7 pages for the book, 7 or 8 pages. It is Attitude Toward Different Religions. That is where we are.
That's the subheading.
That's the
that you will find on
41 of PDF.
If you subtract 7 or 8 pages from the PDF version, you will find that subheading. All right.
Okay. Attitude toward different religions. I read a couple of paragraphs, but I would start from the beginning there.
Please do, dear.
Page 34 in hard copy. Someone posted. Thank you, Danielle. Sri Ramakrishna accepted the divinity of Buddha and used to point out the similarity of his teachings to those of the Upanishads. He also showed great respect for the Tirthankaras, who founded Jainism, and for the 10 gurus of Sikhism. But he did not speak of them as divine incarnations. He was heard to say that the gurus of Sikhism were the reincarnations of King Janaka of ancient India. He kept in his room at Dakshineshwar a small statue of Tirthankara, Mahavira, and a picture of Christ, before which incense was burnt morning and evening.
For those of you who don't know, Mahavira is Hanuman.
Without being formally initiated into their doctrines, Sri Ramakrishna thus realized the ideals of religions other than Hinduism. He did not need to follow any doctrine. All barriers were removed by his overwhelming love of God. So he became a master who could speak with authority regarding the ideas and ideals of the various religions of the world. I have practiced, said he, all religions, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and I've also followed the paths of the different Hindu sects. I have found that it is the same God toward whom all are directing their steps, though along different paths. You must try all beliefs and traverse all the different ways once. Wherever I look, I see men quarreling in the name of religion, Hindus, Mohammedans, Brahmos, Vaishnavas, and the rest. But they never reflect that he who is called Krishna is also called Shiva and bears the name of the primal energy, Jesus, and Allah as well. The same Rama with 1,000 names. A lake has several ghats. At one, the Hindus take water in pitchers and call it Jal. At another, the Muslims take water in leather bags and call it Pani. At a third, the Christians call it water. Can we imagine that it is not Jal, but only Pani or water? How ridiculous. The substance is one under different names, and everyone is seeking the same substance. Only climate, temperament, and name create differences. Let each man follow his own path. If he sincerely and ardently wishes to know God, peace be unto him, he will surely realize him.
There you have it. Please repeat that. This is Sri Ramakrishna's refrain.
Do you want me to read the whole of this, Brother
No,
Shankara?
just that last
Just sentence.
that last sentence about
Yes.
ardently.
Okay. The substance is one under different names, and everyone is seeking the same substance. Only climate, temperament, and name create differences. Let each man follow his own path. If he sincerely and ardently wishes to know God, peace be unto him. He will surely realize him.
If you sincerely and ardently seek God, you will surely realize him, is the promise of this avatar, Sri Ramakrishna, this incarnation. Now, he doesn't say that in some theoretical sense. He says it because he himself can guarantee it. Practice just a little, and someone will come forward to help you. Yearn for God, shed a tear for God, and I'll be right there to be your refuge and your sustainer in that endeavor. This is the promise of all of the incarnations of God. So, any comments from anyone about that, or any concern or any question that needs clarification? Because we shouldn't move on if there's any doubt or concern in your mind that requires clarification. All right, dear, please read on.
In 1867, Sri Ramakrishna returned to Kamarpakur to recuperate from the effect of his austerities. The peaceful countryside, the simple and artless companions of his boyhood, and the pure air did him much good. The villagers were happy to get back their playful, frank, witty, kind-hearted, and truthful Gadadhar, though they did not fail to notice the great change that had come over him during his years in Calcutta. His wife, Sarada Devi, now 14 years old, soon arrived at Kamarpukur. Her spiritual development was much beyond her age, and she was able to understand immediately her husband's state of mind. She became eager to learn from him about God and to live with him as his attendant. The master accepted her cheerfully, both as his disciple and as his spiritual companion. Referring to the experiences of these few days, she once said, "I used to feel always as if a pitcher full of bliss were placed in my heart. The joy was indescribable." End quote. That is the end of attitude toward different religions.
I'd just like to take note
Sure,
of
Brother
the
Shankar.
fact that Sri Sharda Devi, herself an incarnation, they are inseparably one incarnation in two forms. She was 14. This was, I think, they said, what was the year? I'm 1877 when he went back?
1867. He went back to Kamarpukur, 1867.
67.
67,
Okay,
yes.
so 67. He was born in 36. So 36 to 66 is 30 years. So he was 31 years old. His wife, to whom he was wed when she was 5 years old, was now 9 years older, age 14. And it's Nikhilananda very understatedly says her spiritual advancement was beyond her years. Of course it was. But this now became a relationship of disciple and spiritual companion and attendant. She did all kinds of, she took all kinds of care of him. And Gadadhar, as he was known in the countryside at Kamarpukur, Gadadhar, or Gadai as he was known to her, or Gadai was now a fully developed incarnation in his own right. And so now we'll go on to the next subheading. If there are no comments or concerns or questions at anything that we've read or has been said, give rise to. Okay, dear, please go on.
Next subheading is pilgrimage. On January 27, 1868, Madhur Babu, with a party of some 125 persons, set out on a pilgrimage to the sacred places of northern India. At Vijayanath in Bihar, when the master saw the inhabitants of a village reduced by poverty and starvation to mere skeletons, he requested his rich patron to feed the people and give each a piece of cloth. Madhur demurred at the added expense. The master declared bitterly that he would not go on to Banaras, but he would live with the poor and share their miseries. He actually left Mathur and sat down with the villagers. Whereupon Mathur had to yield. On another occasion, 2 years later, Sri Ramakrishna showed a similar sentiment for the poor and needy. He accompanied Mathur on a tour to one of the latter's estates at the time of the collection of rents. For 2 years, the harvests had failed and the tenants were in a state of extreme poverty. The master asked Mathur to remit their rents distribute help to them, and in addition, give the hungry people a sumptuous feast. When Mathur grumbled, the master said, "You are only the steward of the Divine Mother. They are the mother's tenants. You must spend the mother's money. When they are suffering, how can you refuse to help them? You must help them." Again, Madhur had to give in. Sri Ramakrishna's sympathy for the poor sprang from his perception of God in all created beings. His sentiment was not that of the humanist or philanthropist. To him, the service of man was the same as the worship of God. The party entered holy Banaras by boat along the Ganges. When Sri Ramakrishna's eyes fell on this city of Shiva, where had accumulated for ages the devotion and piety of countless worshippers, he saw it to be made of gold, as the scriptures declare. He was visibly moved. During his stay in the city, he treated every particle of its earth with the utmost respect. At the Manikarnika Ghat, the great cremation ground of the city, he actually saw Shiva with ash-covered body and tawny matted hair serenely approaching each funeral pyre and breathing into the ears of the corpses the mantra of liberation. And then the Divine Mother removing from the dead their bonds. Thus, he realized the significance of the scriptural statement that anyone dying in Banaras attains salvation through the grace of Shiva.
This continues to be
The belief.
a belief and a fact that people go to Benares to pass away so that they will experience just exactly what Sri Ramakrishna witnessed, which is Shiva whispering into the ear of the departing, the mantra of liberation, and Mother removing the knots of the heart or the bonds that hold them to this, the remaining bonds that might hold them to this plane of reincarnation. So this is an ancient and, according to Sri Ramakrishna, completely accurate belief. And by the by, you know, when we hear about Sri Ramakrishna insisting to Mathur that the villagers be fed, that their rents be remitted because they were in such extreme poverty and so on, this continues to be part of the Ramakrishna missions, missionary activities. They provide all kinds of food, clothing, cooking utensils, even build houses for people where there is a disaster, a flood, a famine. The Ramakrishna Order is an exemplary organization for this kind of service. Now, why don't we do that here in the West? Swami Vivekananda said, no, there are plenty of social service organizations to do that kind of thing here in the West. And let us, in the West, focus on spiritual realization. And so that's why you don't find the Ramakrishna centers, the Vivekananda Holy Mother centers, the Vedanta societies, and so on, engaging much in social service. You know, a little bit. In Hollywood, they raise food and give it away in Vivekananda's name. We have here At the winter season, we have something called Holy Mother's Helping Hands, which is just a gesture in that direction. But it is one of the major activities of the Ramakrishna order in India. You can look it up online. It's really quite remarkable. And they are trusted completely and implicitly by the government of India with billions of rupees to take and to disaster and famine regions and make those rupees work for the people in terms of sustenance and clothing and, as I say, cooking utensils, even homes. Any comments or concerns or questions about anything that's been said or read? Okay, dear, please read on.
Sure. He paid a visit to Trilanga Swami, the celebrated monk, whom he later declared to be a real Paramahamsa, a veritable image of Shiva. Sri Ramakrishna visited Allahabad at the confluence of the Ganges and the Jamuna, and then proceeded to Vrindavan and Madura, hallowed by the legends, songs, and dramas about Krishna and the gopis. Here he had numerous visions, and his heart overflowed with divine emotion. He wept and said, "O Krishna, everything here is as it was in the olden days. You alone are absent." He visited the great woman saint Ganga Mai, regarded by Vaishnava devotees as the reincarnation of an intimate attendant of Radha. She was 60 years old and had frequent trances. She spoke of Sri Ramakrishna as an incarnation of Radha. With great difficulty, he was persuaded to leave her. On the return journey, Madhur wanted to visit Gaya, but Sri Ramakrishna declined to go. He recalled his father's vision at Gaya before his own birth and felt that in the temple of Vishnu, he would become permanently absorbed in God. Madhur, honoring the master's wish, returned with his party to Calcutta.
So they didn't go to Gaya because Sri Ramakrishna felt that if he went there, he wouldn't be able to leave. He wouldn't be able to go back to Kolkata, that he would become absorbed and leave the body in the temple of Vishnu there, where, of course, he is an incarnation of Vishnu. This is what he said himself. He who was Rama, he who was Krishna, is present here as Ramakrishna, pointing to his own body. Who was it that was Rama? Who was it that was Krishna? These are incarnations of Vishnu. So this is an important incident, and you'll notice that Mathur takes it seriously, and the last thing that he wants is for the master to leave him. So he agrees and returns to Kolkata. Anything else from anyone? All right, dear, please read on.
From Vrindavan, the master had brought a handful of dust. Part of this he scattered in the Panchavati. The rest he buried in the little hut where he had practiced meditation. Now this place, he said, is as sacred as Vrindavan. In 1870, the master went on a pilgrimage to Nadia, the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya. As the boat by which he traveled approached the sandbank close to Nadia, Sri Ramakrishna had a vision of the two brothers, Sri Chaitanya and his companion Nityananda, bright as molten gold and with the hollows rushing to greet him with uplifted hands. There they come, he cried. They entered his body and he went into a deep trance. That is the end of pilgrimage. Now we are moving to relation.
There's an interesting incident
Isn't it? Yeah.
about this visit to Nadia, where Sri Chaitanya lived. It isn't told here, but it is told later in the gospel. The master, the master was taken to the village where it was said Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived. And he said, no, he didn't live here. This is not his presence. I don't feel it here. And then he got back in the boat to go away. And he said, oh, it's here. And sure enough, after some research, it was found that the village had been submerged by a change in the course of the Ganges River. It had been submerged. So Sri Ramakrishna was right. And this is where it's at that place that he saw the two brothers rushing toward him and merging with him. So anything else from anyone? Somebody posted something on chat.
Oh, that's Michaeli. She said she had to leave early.
Okay, well, bless her heart.
Bless her. Now we're moving on to, do you want me to move on, Brother Shankara?
Yes, indeed, dear.
Okay. Relation with his wife. In 1872, Sarada Devi paid her first visit to her husband at Dakshineshwar. 4 years earlier, she had seen him at Kamarpakur and had tasted the bliss of his divine company. Since then, she had become even more gentle, tender, introspective, serious, and unselfish. She had heard many rumors about her husband's insanity. People had shown her pity in her misfortune. The more she thought, the more she felt that her duty was to be with him, giving him, in whatever measure she could, a wife's devoted service. She was now 18 years old. Accompanied by her father, she arrived at Dakshineshwar, having come on foot the distance of 80 miles. Wow. She had had an attack of fever on the way. When she arrived at the temple garden, the master said sorrowfully, "Ah, you have come too late. My mother is no longer here to look after you." Mother had passed away the previous year. The master took up the duty of instructing his young wife, and this included everything from housekeeping to the knowledge of Brahman. He taught her how to trim a lamp, how to behave toward people according to their differing temperaments, and how to conduct herself before visitors. He instructed her in the mysteries of spiritual life, prayer, meditation, japa, deep contemplation, and samadhi. The first lesson that Sarada Devi received was, God is everybody's beloved, just as the moon is dear to every child. Everyone has the same right to pray him. Out of his grace, he reveals himself to all who call upon him. You too will see him if you but pray to him. End quote.
Okay, please read that quote again.
I will.
This is again Sri Ramakrishna's promise. This promise that only an incarnation can make. Please read that quote again, dear.
I will. The first lesson that Sarada Devi received was, God is everybody's beloved, just as the moon is dear to every child. Everyone has the same right to pray him. Out of his grace, he reveals himself to all who call upon him. You too will see him if you but pray to him. End quote.
Okay, any comment or concern or question about that? This is, again, this tremendous promise.
It is so true, Brother Shankara.
Yes, it is.
It is for everybody. That's right.
All right, dears. Let's read on.
Sure. Totapuri, coming to know of the master's marriage, had once remarked, "What does it matter? He alone is firmly established in the knowledge of Brahman, who can adhere to his spirit of discrimination and renunciation even while living with his wife. He alone has attained the supreme illumination, who can look on man and woman alike as Brahman. A man with the idea of sex may be a good aspirant, but he is still far from the goal." Sri Ramakrishna and his wife lived together at Dakshineshwar, but their minds always soared above the worldly plane. A few months after Sarada Devi's arrival, Sri Ramakrishna arranged on an auspicious day a special worship of Kali, the Divine Mother. Instead of an image of the deity, he placed on the seat the living image, Sharada Devi herself. The worshipper and the worshipped went into deep samadhi, and in the transcendental plane, their souls were united. After several hours, Sri Ramakrishna came down again to the relative plane, sang a hymn to the great goddess, and surrendered at the feet of the living image himself, his rosary, and the fruit of his long sadhana. This is known in Tantra as the Shodasi Puja, the adoration of woman. Sri Ramakrishna realized the significance of the great statement of the Upanishad. O Lord, thou art the woman, thou art the man, thou art the boy, thou art the girl, thou art the old, tottering on their crutches. Thou pervadest the universe in its multiple forms. End quote.
That quote, by the way, is from the Svetasvatara Upanishad. And for anyone who wants to know that Upanishad, and it's well worth your time, there's a wonderful, wonderful book titled Svetasvatara Upanishad by Devadatta Kali. Devadatta, Devatta, next word Kali, Kali. Devadatta Kali is a disciple of Swami Prabhavananda. And this great work of his was done. It's a translation into English of the Svetasvatara, but with a magnificent introduction to the whole conceptual framework from which the Svetasvatara arises, and the whole aspect of Sanatana Dharma from which it arises. So anyone who wants to know more, if you didn't get down what I just said, of course you can listen to the recording of the class and find it that way. We may hang a link to it. I'll see if I can remember to ask Cindy to hang a link to that book along with the class when the class is put up. Otherwise, anyone who's interested, all they have to do is give me a call or send me an email. We can discuss it. Devadatta Kali, Svatasvatara Upanishad. He also did a similar work on the Chandi, on the Devi Mahatmyam, called In Praise of the Goddess. And again, a magnificent book. Anything else from anyone? Okay, please read on, dear.
Sure. By his marriage, Sri Ramakrishna admitted the great value of marriage in man's spiritual evolution, and by adhering to his monastic vows, he demonstrated the imperative necessity of self-control, purity, and continence in the realization of God. By his unique spiritual relationship with his wife, he proved that a husband and wife can live together as spiritual companions. Thus, his life is a synthesis of the ways of life of the householder and the monk. That is the end of this relation with his wife. Any questions or comments, Brother Shankara, before I move on to ego of the master?
Okay, this is what is said in the traditional Vedic conception of marriage, grihastha, householder, that the man and woman have one or two children, and after they have these two children and raise them, are raising them according to their children's period of brahmacharya, that the man and woman are to live together as brother and sister, spiritual companions. And Swami Prabhavananda was a great advocate and adherent of this idea, and really taught it to his disciples, as was Swami Swahananda, his successor as head of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. I don't know, because I haven't heard him speak about such things. I don't know if Swami Sarvadevananda also teaches that, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if somebody poked the honeycomb that's what would come out. All right, dears. Please read on.
Okay. The next subheading is the ego of the master. In the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna had realized that Brahman alone is real and the world illusory. By keeping his mind 6 months on the plane of the non-dual Brahman, he had attained to the state of the Vijnani, the knower of truth, in a special and very rich sense, who sees Brahman not only in himself and in the transcendental absolute, but in everything of the world. I'll read this one more time. In the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna had realized that Brahman alone is real and the world illusory.
This is jnana. Now, this is the experience of Advaita, or jnana. Now, we'll see how Sri Ramakrishna went on beyond that to this state called vijnana, special knowledge.
Right. By keeping his mind 6 months on the plane of the non-dual Brahman, he had attained to the state of the Vijnani, the knower of truth in a special and very rich sense, who sees Brahman not only in himself and in the transcendental absolute, but in everything of the world. In the state of vijnana, sometimes bereft of the body consciousness, he would regard himself as one with Brahman. Sometimes conscious of the dual world, he would regard himself as God's devotee, servant, or child.
Now, this is the state of Bhavamukha. We read about it earlier, that Kali herself told him to remain in this state of Bhavamukha. Bhavamukha is this one foot, so to speak, in the absolute and 1 foot in the relative. So please read that again,
Sure.
dear. And this is what is described. Just read it from as a Vijnani, what he experienced. This is the Bhavamukha that the mother instructed him to remain in, and so this is his personal experience of it.
In this state of vijnana, sometimes bereft of body consciousness, he would regard himself as one with Brahman. Sometimes conscious of the dual world, he would regard himself as God's devotee, servant, or child. In order to enable the master to work for the welfare of humanity, the Divine Mother kept in him a trace of ego, which he described according to his mood as the ego of knowledge, the ego of devotion, the ego of a child, or the ego of a servant. In any case, this ego of the master, consumed by the fire of the knowledge of Brahman, was an appearance only, like a burnt string. He often referred to this ego as the ripe ego, in contrast with the ego of the bound soul, which he described as the unripe or green ego. The ego of the bound soul identifies itself with the body, relatives, possessions, and the world, but the ripe ego, illumined by divine knowledge, knows the body, relatives, possessions, and the world to be unreal and establishes a relationship of love with God alone. I'll go back and read this one more time, Brother Shankara.
And when we hear unreal,
Sure.
Let's understand that Sri Ramakrishna agreed with Adi Shankaracharya when he said, yes, it has a relative reality, but it's a superimposition on reality. It isn't, it's like this business of seeing the snake where there is only a coiled rope. We superimpose the idea of snake on this coiled rope. It isn't as if there's nothing there. There's a coiled rope. So we don't make it up entirely. We just superimpose a different reality on the reality that is underlying. So this is what is meant by what Sri Ramakrishna is saying here.
You want me to move on? Read again. In order to enable the master to work for the welfare of humanity, the Divine Mother kept in him a trace of ego, which he described according to his mood as the ego of knowledge, the ego of devotion, the ego of a child, or the ego of a servant. In any case, this ego of the master, consumed by the fire of the knowledge of Brahman, was an appearance only, like a burnt string. He often referred to this as the ripe ego, in contrast with the ego of the bound soul, which he described as the unripe or green ego. The ego of the bound soul identifies itself with the body, relatives, possessions, and the world. But the ripe ego, illumined by divine knowledge, knows the body, relatives, possessions, and the world to be unreal, and establishes a relationship of love with God alone. Through this ripe ego, Sri Ramakrishna dealt with the world and his wife. One day, while stroking his feet, Sharada Devi asked the master, "What do you think of me?" Quick came the answer. "The mother who is worshipped in the temple is the mother who has given birth to my body and is now living in the Nahabat, and it is she again who is stroking my feet at this moment. Indeed, I always look on you as the personification of the blissful Mother Kali." End quote. Sarada Devi.
Please read that again, dear.
I
And
sure will.
let's understand that Sri Ramakrishna, this is not some idea of
Yes.
his. This is his literal experience. This is what he experiences. It isn't like something he's learned and is applying. It is his experience. So please read that again, dear.
Definitely. Through this ripe ego, Sri Ramakrishna dealt with the world and his wife. One day, while stroking his feet, Sarada Devi asked the master, "What do you think of me?" Quick came the answer. "The mother who is worshipped in the temple is the mother who has given birth to my body and is now living in the Nahavat, and it is she again who is stroking my feet at this moment. Indeed, I always look on you as the personification of the blissful Mother Kali." End quote.
Now, just so that there's no doubt in anyone's mind about what's meant by this, the person living in the Nahabat was indeed Sri Sharda. She lived in the Nahabat. So he says, when you're living in the Nahabat, and now when you're stroking my feet, same mother, same mother, same mother. So this is the ideal, and of course it's said in the Chandi. All mythologies and scriptures are your aspects, O Devi. So are all women in the world, endowed with various attributes. Every woman is a personification, an embodiment of that mother principle. And so each one. And so this is why Sri Ramakrishna said, salute all women as the Divine Mother. Any concerns, comments, or questions about that? All right, dear, please read on.
Sharada Devi, in the company of her husband, had rare spiritual experiences. She said, "I have no words to describe my wonderful exaltation of spirit as I watched him in his different moods. Under the influence of divine emotion, he would sometimes talk on abstruse subjects, sometimes laugh, sometimes weep, and sometimes become perfectly motionless in samadhi. This would continue throughout the night. There was such an extraordinary divine presence in him that now and then I would shake with fear and wonder how the night would pass. Months went by in this way. Then one day he discovered that I had to keep awake the whole night lest during my sleep he should go into samadhi, for it might happen at any moment. And so he asked me to sleep in the Nahabat." That's the end of the ego of the master. Any comments, Brother Shankara, from you or anyone?
No, I think that
Okay.
unless there's something from someone else, that's this ego of the master. You will notice that he called it the ego of knowledge or the ego of devotion. This is the jnani and the bhakta, you know. So when he was embodying this ego of knowledge, he was acting out this jnani way of being. When he had the ego of devotion, he was the acting out the devotees, the bhakta's way of being. And you can see as we read through the book how he does one thing and then another, alternatively all the time. And it has to do with who he's with, usually. But there's also this ego of the servant or child, which he highly recommends for us. He says, this is the most useful bhava, or the two bhavas, the dasya bhava of the servant, and the ego, the attitude or bhava of the child, which I've forgotten what the Sanskrit is for that. But these are the two that he most highly recommended for this time and this place, just as he highly recommended for almost every human being in this age that we live our lives as bhaktas, that we that the path of devotion, bhakti, is the most useful and practical path for this end of the Kali Yuga.
Shankara.
Yes.
Quick question for you. M states here that he felt like he needed to stay awake the entire night for Sri Ramakrishna. Was that because in samadhi he became unaware of his body?
Well,
Was there some other purpose
he might
as well?
need tending to, but when we read on into the gospel itself, we hear that what she was really, when he would go into profound samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi, he would appear to be dead. There was no sign of life in the body whatsoever. I mean, there just no heartbeat, no breathing, no pupillary response, no nothing. And so this frightened her. Was he dead or would he return? So she had to stay awake so that she would know. And this is why Sri Ramakrishna said, "Oh, my dear, you shouldn't have to be going through this. This is just how I live. This is just who I am. But you shouldn't have to stay awake all night to make certain that I'm cared for, whether I'm alive or dead." And so he asked her to sleep in the Nahabat, which was not a very convenient place to sleep, but as we'll learn. But it at least removed her from this constant apprehension that he might go into the deepest samadhi at any moment for no reason that she could discern. And so she couldn't do this or do that to make it happen or not happen. So she felt helpless, completely helpless. And so he said, well, you go sleep with someplace where you can get a night's rest. That's my understanding of it, Daniel.
I missed the full in quotation mark, so you're right. That definitely was ascribed to Pisarda Devi and not to M. I was thinking it was M. It makes a lot more sense now. Thank you.
Brother Shankara, bhava of the child, I just looked in Google, it's a putra bhava. Putra is a putra bhava. That's what you mean. Bhava of the child is putra bhava. Putra is the
So Dasya Bhava is the ego of a servant.
Okay.
Putra Bhava is the ego of a
Of
child.
child. That's right.
So these are the two that Sri Ramakrishna most highly recommended to us. And it is the ones that Sri Ramakrishna order monks strive to embody, that they do their best to become to embody that servant ego, that they totally see themselves as the servant of the master, and then later in life, sometimes one of the swamis will say, "Well, I've lost that servant ego now, and I'm living in the lap of the mother in that child's attitude, that child's bhava." So, it comes when they're no longer able to serve in the way that they did when they were younger. Thank you for looking it up, dear.
Sure, Brother Shankara. Next subheading is a summary of the master's spiritual experiences. It's a very short one, and I think by that time it'll be our time to close too, Brother Shankara.
Okay, very good, dear.
This is a very short, small couple of paragraphs. Summary of the master's spiritual experiences. We have now come to the end of Sri Ramakrishna's sadhana, the period of his spiritual discipline. As a result of his supersensuous experiences, he reached certain conclusions regarding himself and spirituality in general. His conclusions about himself may be summarized as follows. First, he was an incarnation of God, a specially commissioned person whose spiritual experiences were for the benefit of humanity. Whereas it takes an ordinary man a whole life's struggle to realize one or two faces of God. He had one in a few years realized God in all his faces. Second, he knew that he had always been a free soul, that the various disciplines through which he had passed were really not necessary for his own liberation, but were solely for the benefit of others. Thus, the terms liberation and bondage were not applicable to him. As long as there are beings who consider themselves bound, God must come down to earth as an incarnation to free them from bondage, just as a magistrate must visit any part of his district in which there is trouble. Third, he came to foresee the time of his death. His words with respect to this matter were literally fulfilled. That's the end of the summary of Master's spiritual experiences, Brother Shankara.
Thank you, dear. Yeah, we'll start with that again next time.
Yes.
And this very succinct.
Yes.
The master had realized himself as an avatar, that everything he had done is for the benefit of humankind, which of course is reflected in Swami Vivekananda's breaker of this world's chain. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. O merciful, if we take any hold upon God in our prayer, it is by thy grace alone, since all thine austerities were practiced for our sake. These are the lines from Breaker of This World's Chain. And so we'll leave it at that for this evening.
Sure.
Thank you as always, Haima. Thank you all for being with us. This heartfelt prayer we can each and every one take deeply into ourselves and repeat for ourselves. because it is a very succinct and complete prayer for this liberation that the Master speaks of. Om Hari Om. Om Sato Ma Satkamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amrutangamaya. Abir Abir Moiti. O dearly beloved, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from this realm of endless noise and relentless delusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. O dearly beloved, make it so. Peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we all be safe. May we all be healthy. May we all be cheerful. May we all have peace of mind. May we all go forward in the secure knowledge that we are in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Hari Om Tat Sat. Dearly beloved, make it so. Any final thought from anyone? Anything at all before we close? All right, dears, until tomorrow night when we'll take up the Gita. Swayam Prabha is our reader. And then, of course, on Saturday, Jeff Sowlich is our reader for How to Know God. And then this coming Sunday, we'll take up, because it will now be the first Sunday in June, we'll take up Bhakti Yoga. We've been studying Jnana Yoga for the month of May. We'll take up Bhakti Yoga. So, if there's nothing else from anyone, a sweet good night to you. All right, good night, everyone.